Welcome to Crowning Connections. This is Rob Clemens, and it is an exciting day in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The weather is starting to cool down a little bit.
Yes.
We're full swing into the fall season right now. We maybe had a little hurricane scare recently, but my man Ed Piotrowski over at the weather station there
Kept it straight.
He's still going to do some pizza parties. Now, by the way, this is something. Have you heard about this pizza party?
No, I have not.
All right, well, that's a whole other thing. And I'm plugging Ed today and his pizza party because he says, if you can get through without a hurricane during the season, you still can have the pizza party.
Well, that's a tall task.
That's the thing. We did it last year though, and it was crazy. But anyway, I'm a little off topic. But if you are on the Grand Strand, if you're a business leader, I think today's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn some things and just to hear, as we like to do, a little bit of a humanization of people in business. And so today I'm very blessed to have Will Howard. He is the market executive of the Grand Strand for First Citizens Bank.
Yes.
Will, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate the invitation, and it's wonderful to share some time with you.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over time,
absolutely.
And usually we end up talking about this or that, and whether we're going to talk some hardcore business or get into some sports. I think you're a sports fan,
Oh,
yeah?
absolutely, a fanatic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Remind me, who are your teams? So let's go NFL.
I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina, so I'm a Gamecock at heart.
Oh.
I've now got twin daughters that are freshmen in college, and one's at Clemson University and one's at the University of South Carolina.
Ooh.
So I'm pulled in a couple directions. You have to be a fan once you start writing checks, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
Right.
I hear about it from my Gamecock brethren, but I'm a sports fan for sure. I've got a 15-year-old son, too, that loves to play anything he can get his hands on.
Is he going to go to Coastal just to make it interesting?
We're going to try and go with the trifecta.
The holy trifecta
well,
there.
If Mom could keep him that close to home, we'd be a happy family.
You guys will be
So,
doing pretty well.
we'd be
All right.
great.
You got to start your recruiting early.
Oh, absolutely.
You really do. All right.
Absolutely. We're trying our hardest.
So when it comes to the game in this season where it's Clemson and University of South Carolina, where is your allegiance going then?
Well, my allegiance will go with my diploma. But
enough.
I will say this will be the first time we've had them at both schools as their freshmen. So I have a feeling Thanksgiving weekend will be an interesting dynamic this year.
I think it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, full on school shirts and everything.
We will forge forward. Hopefully, Thanksgiving will still occur in the Howard household. But I'm confident we will enjoy seeing them and having them back for sure.
Well, I think so. And one of the coolest things I thought for the audience is that they're twins, and so often you'll see the twins, and they start off when they're young and they're dressed the same way.
Oh, they were.
And they play the same sports and they do everything. And then sometimes they even go to the same school and all this. So they decided, let's break off, right?
Not just let's break off, let's go to Clemson.
Absolutely.
And South Carolina.
Right.
Well, and interestingly enough, for ours, Adams and Nolan, they go in their first 18 years. They only spent 3 days apart once. And they had the occasional spend the night out, but they had a very similar friend group. They liked the same things. Fortunately, they've got my wife's brain, so they were very academically, they did well in school, but they were always together. They shared a car. They never had a problem with it. And then leading up to college, I think they finally figured out, that path needs to be developed a little bit.
It's time to tell.
So one is at Clemson and enjoying herself and doing well. And
do they ever try to play
Carolina.
tricks on you guys?
They did. They did not trick us too frequently. They did pull the old switch in school twice, once in elementary school, once in middle school, which technically for us was intermediate school. So they got their teachers twice. Once they got in a little trouble, I think the other one, they thought it was kind of funny, but yeah,
did the teachers ever find out? I need to know.
They found out about 45 minutes to an hour into it by the time.
Oh wow! Okay,
so they had a little bit of ramp time.
Got you
in there.
Well, yeah. So there was a little bit of tomfoolery going on.
Absolutely.
But I had this beautiful vision for a minute that maybe that the teacher would just find out by hearing this show, years later, I knew it.
No, they got caught. I think in both cases, finally, it was another student. The snickering could only go so far.
Okay.
And so the teacher kind of picked up on something's off.
Yeah.
And they kind of read the room.
They're kind of like, yeah, something's going. It's
Yeah.
that old thing where you get the substitute teacher, and all of a sudden people are like changing seats
Yeah.
around, and they
Yeah.
got different. I mean, that's not what I did when I was
Oh,
little. I was
no,
by the
never.
books, baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. I can tell that about you already.
Right. No shenanigans here.
Yeah, exactly.
Because at the Clemens household, they were still willing to, not spare thy rod
Right.
or whatever. So anyway, all right, getting a little bibiblical.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Well, Will, you got a big job here out here in Myrtle Beach with First Citizens Bank, and I've noticed that you really take a lot of pride in what you do. I feel like you have such a sense of pride in the culture of your company.
Yes.
But before we get into all that, and I'd love to talk about those topics, tell us a little bit about yourself. Take us back to the start and kind of what got you to this point of your career.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. That's a great question. I mean, I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. I've been a South Carolinian all my life. Went to the University of South Carolina, as I mentioned, and met my wife, Ann Nolan, there. Was engaged prior to graduating, so I knew getting out of school it was time to get a real job.
Right.
Bartending and waiting tables wasn't going to suffice anymore, and so I was searching for what to do. My uncle was a banker at Nations Bank at the time in their trust department. And I remember going and meeting with him and sitting down, and I didn't know anything about banking. I mean, in my mind, it was, the middle-aged person in a white suit and behind a desk all day, and really no concept outside of that's an office job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a people person, much like yourself. It would drive me crazy not to talk to people constantly throughout the day. And he told me something that sticks with me to this day. But he said, banking, regardless of what area you're in, it's a wonderful profession, because whether you're dealing with a family or a business owner or a widow, or they've got dreams that you're trying to help them recognize.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, we're trying to help somebody get to a goal that usually is the sum total of a lot of decisions and goals along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, I've come to really appreciate and enjoy walking through that phase of life with people as they move from, being single to being married to having children, or their business is going from this cycle to this cycle. Again, they've got a goal
Mm-hmm.
that they'd like to get to at the end of the day. And usually that goal is made up of 10 to 15 decisions over a period of time.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. Personally, I love leading a group of dynamic people and dynamic markets, and then enjoy at the same time being able to work with businesses in very different industries.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we talked a lot in the past about just, being in different situations and leading through different situations. And so I've come to really appreciate about the banking profession in general. I thought I'd just immediately go into sales for somebody. Be in front of people all the time.
Exactly.
And I quickly learned that that's exactly what this industry offers, is being in front of people.
It's kind of interesting. You're not back there just counting nickels all day. Is that
No,
what you're telling me?
and I love numbers.
Yeah.
Analytically, that's kind of how my brain works.
Okay,
So
okay.
I enjoy the accounting aspect of what
Wow,
we do.
you're one of those
I'm one of the
rare
weirdos.
Like you're a personality. You're one of those weirdos we talk about. No.
exactly.
No. You're one of those people that like you got the personality side, but you're also very detailed and structural. Which is sometimes you're one or the other.
Right.
But so you're right down the middle there.
Yeah.
Would you say? And I think I'm just curious about this. You talk about those 10 to 15 major kind of life decisions that happen, and I think that's a good way to put it. Do you find that people in modern America are hanging with one bank throughout that whole period of time? I mean, obviously like that.
Oh, we would love to
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
But if that were the case, we also would never have any new clients as
Yeah,
well. So
right.
we
True,
realize
true.
that's not always going to be the case. But no, I think people, we're obviously in a very different world today than we were 3 years ago, and certainly that we were prior to that. I mean, technology drives such a different environment that we're in. But I do think that there is still that core in people that they look for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can get a lot of information on the internet. Yes, you can go out and there's information readily at your fingertips. But I think a lot of times people are looking for somebody they trust to help deliver what they know is accurate. And that's where we try to instill that into our bankers to make sure, build that deeper relationship so that when they do have that quick question, they're calling somebody that they trust. And there is that trusted advisor piece to what we do. And so, my dollar and everybody else's dollar on the corner is the exact same. And so to make banking not a commodity, it's important that we make sure our people are armed and ready to answer those questions and be a part of that process with somebody along the way.
Okay.
And hopefully that does create that long-term relationship and retention. And we're blessed to have customers that have been with us for generations.
Yeah,
quite frankly.
yeah.
We're
passing on
generations.
on
That generation.
Wow, that's cool.
But it's certainly an interesting environment today. We're in a competitive environment, just like you all are, and we recognize that, and we welcome the competition. And again, I think it goes back to our ability to deliver that model that makes that client feel like, okay, when something hits the fan, I know who to call to get some direction.
Okay, correct. And I understand that. I think this is the goal of a lot of businesses. When a lot of us talk about it, we talk about it, but then you find us, deviating from it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you, on a day-to-day, like what you said is very easy for people to understand. And it goes for any business. I talk to the people at this company about, just pretend, for all the processes and policies that we've set up, just pretend you're doing this for your mother. Okay. And then you don't have to have policies and procedures. You're going to call your mom and tell her, hey, somebody's gonna be out at your house today and you're going to really like that person. And then tomorrow we're going to follow up with a report and it's going to be, that's how you talk to your mom. But all of a sudden I have to make processes for people to understand, now I got to call the customer. Right. Check. Now I got to tell them, okay, check. So how do you get through, I think culturally speaking, that message to continue and pervade the company?
Well, culture is intentional, right? And I think it has to be ongoing. I can tell you what I want my culture to be no matter what industry I am in, but the reality is do we intentionally live it out? Do we intentionally continue to focus on it? Because if you don't, in my mind, I've seen a lot of businesses and a lot of folks in our industry as well, culture will change because society is going to push you in one direction, and a lot of times culture is pushing back against it.
Yeah.
And so I think what I've loved with our leadership and at First Citizens is it has been. We're third generation culture drivers, right? We're a family controlled business, largest one in the United States, and that's created that stable culture over time. But I do think, to your point, business owners do think about culture consistently, and there's got to be a short-term piece and a long-term piece. And when you talk about process and things that get in the way, I think sometimes we get too focused on that short-term piece.
Yeah.
And then that culture kind of gets off a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want to be too mechanical,
If you change the direction of a boat by 1 degree after 100 or 200 miles, they're light years from where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take a big shift after time to be way off point.
Yeah, good point.
And that's where I think that consistency needs to come from.
When you guys are hiring, obviously, if you talk about a focus on culture, how much are you looking at an employee and saying, they just don't fit our culture here? And the people that are hiring those employees, because you're not obviously probably interviewing every single employee that comes through, I assume,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Nor do I here,
right.
But how do you ensure, though, that you know what I'm talking about?
Well, and that's a great question, because I would say that is a much harder question to answer today than it was even a year ago.
Yeah.
We were listening. I was on a conference call before we came here, and one of the biggest things we talked about is the last 90 days of the labor market. And what we're seeing, you can read all the statistics you want nationwide, but when you sit down and you live it doesn't matter what the nationwide statistics say. It can be painful. So when you've got a bunch of openings and you need to staff your organization in order to serve your existing customer base, and you've got 20 openings that question that you ask becomes very difficult.
Well, yeah.
Do you slide a little bit on this, or do you slide a little bit on that?
Hey, this guy's kind of uptight, but all of a sudden,
my job today will be a lot easier if that seat is filled.
Right. Well, and these are real world problems for businesses.
Problems. Absolutely, and it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're making widgets or hamburgers or putting roofs on buildings or selling financial products. It is the largest topic of a business owner today is hiring.
I mean, and I want to go back to that, but first I want to tell you a little bit about me. Back in high school, I worked at a place called the Burger Bar.
Yeah.
This is true. And I like to share with people that even at that time, and I'll tell my employees sometimes, they're kind of like, how did you, oh, you're the GM, so you got to be all. I remember when people come up to the counter and I'd be like, hi, welcome to the Burger Bar. How can I help you? And they're like stunned, like, what are you so happy about?
Yeah, you had that energy back then.
Well, and I was kind of like, I'm like looking around like, what am I doing wrong here? Right. I almost thought that's what all of us were supposed to do. But I say that to say your culture is, it is what it is. And so you have a personal kind of like your own internal culture who you are. And then you're hoping that matches the business you go to.
Absolutely.
But then we find ourselves under pressure as hirers to say, well, I guess they'll do. And so often that doesn't work. What happened in the last 90 days, though? I'm curious. You said in the last 90 days it's been a little...
Well, for us, I think, and again, I think you probably see it out there, it's just we're seeing so much more competition. Wages have shot up in the last 6 months. Again, that's a nationwide phenomenon and regional phenomenon. And so you're seeing a lot of movement because of wages. Everybody's cost of hiring is shooting through the roof.
Yeah.
And so as a business, how do you manage that? How do you curb it as much as you can? How do you retain as much as you can? And hopefully you've set the groundwork over decades. Again, back to that culture thing. You've created that environment where people are eager to be there, eager to learn, eager to grow. And so another $1 an hour maybe isn't what they thought it might once be.
Well, and I agree with that. One thing I want to talk to you about, though, and just get your perspective on is, I feel like as business leaders, so often we get so busy thinking, how am I going to attract talent? What do I need to pay talent? What do I need to give talent? But you got these great people working for you right now. And I fear that sometimes as we're so busy, like, oh, if I could just do this, I'll attract this guy.
Right.
But you got that hard working manager or person that's been loyally, are we worried about what they're making?
Right.
And are we taking the time to step back and say, are we competitively paying the person that we know is a good commodity?
Yeah.
How do you stay ahead of that?
Well, again, it's about intentionality. I think 'cause in my life, in my career in banking, I have looked back in the mirror sometimes and said, Will, your prospecting is important. We need new clients. We need to build our balance sheet. We got to grow the bank, but it is you better not lose sight on that customer. That retaining and taking care of and growing those customers. And I think that's the same thing for your associates. If you think and forward yourself so much going forward towards getting those new employees, like you said, and you lose sight on developing and growing and taking care of that customer, that employee base you've got, well, you'll lose more than you'll gain. And you'll finally, that one step forward and 2 steps back is a painful dance.
Right? Very much, yes.
And so again, you're consistently looking at what is a competitive wage environment. Okay, what are the additional benefits we can provide to our associates? How do we make a development and training program something that they find value in?
Training development program.
5 years from now, they're in a very different role. It's a very different place for their family and for their children and so forth. So I think it's one of those things where it's a pretty simple question when you say it and ask it, but it's one of those ones that's got a very complex answer to it because it's not just one answer. It's usually, again, back to that end goal made up of a bunch of different decisions along the way.
Yes.
It's that answer that's got a lot of different little pieces to it. It's got to all fit in place like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Right?
I get you. Staying along the hiring lines, Where do you see Gen Z in the equation? Obviously, right now the older millennials are in their 30s. The younger millennials are in their late 20s.
Right.
And then you got the Gen Z group, let's say up to 23, 24, maybe around that range.
Yeah.
What are they looking for in a workplace? Or have you guys got data on that yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of data out there, and I've read it. Just, I'm sure you have. My experience. We just came out of a summer where we had 80 interns throughout the bank. All of them were rising juniors and seniors. Most of them rising seniors. We had a wonderful intern from Coastal Carolina join us here in this market, and I think at the core, what they want is the same thing that other generations have wanted, but they've grown up in a very different environment in terms of access to technology, access to information. Again, when I graduated from the University of South Carolina, we had a career center. We could go. There were companies that would come and they would put out information on their company. They'd host interviews, but we had to walk over to the career center to find out what that was.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself a little bit. I'm not,
way back
I'm not
then.
that old. Way back before there were the bag cell phones, Rob, but we didn't have the smartphones of today. But now somebody graduating from college is on LinkedIn. They're on other social media platforms. They rapidly hear about what opportunities are out there. I think schools like Coastal do a wonderful job of connecting graduates and students to opportunities to learn and to be employed. But again, back to your question, I think they want the same thing, but sometimes you worry that they're not patient enough to wait to see if they found it.
Yeah.
And again, some of that goes back to that learning and making sure that those folks find value in that. I know that learning isn't like compensation. But if you take a little bit of that longer term approach and you don't just look at what your paycheck will be next week, I think a lot of times you again go back to that ship and the two different paths. You can find yourself on point if you can have some patience to learn and develop it. And if I ever come across folks who have found that person that's willing to roll up their sleeves and grab that 25-year-old associate and say, look, I really think you've got something. Stick with me, let's develop you, and you will be somewhere different in 10 years versus hopping around from place to place to earn another dollar or two here or there. Again, that's definitely a different trajectory on that associate's life. And that's where I hope that generation would buy into, see that value, and commit to that.
I agree with this. I will tell you, we had the pleasure of getting invited to Coastal Carolina's, I'm going to call it job recruiting fair, about 2 weeks ago. And when we went out, I hope that anybody, not just college kids, but anybody looking for a job understands the power of what happens when something like this goes on. Myself and the human resources director for the company, we have a recruiter at our company. A lot of people would walk by the table and just kind of, they kind of, walk by and, hey, what's this? And maybe grab a pen and walk on. And out of that whole group of students, and a lot of great candidates there, a lot of smart students coming out of Coastal Carolina and HGTC. I have a lot of respect for our school system, but only 2 or 3 came over and with a confident handshake looked you in the eye and said, wow, I've seen you guys around and I'd love to hear more about your company.
Right.
And do you know what that did for me?
They were on a rocket ship in your brain right there. Absolutely.
Automatically. Yeah. I don't know anything about you, but I love the way you just talked to me. And that tells me that the customers are going to love the way that you're going to talk to them. Right. And that's step one. You want to talk about company culture. You want to talk about building something that people can get behind. That is the person. I don't know at that point anything about you other than I like you. Right. And so it shows an interest and it shows a mindset, and it's the simplest thing, and it's easier for some than others.
Absolutely.
Introverted person, that's a lot harder than an extrovert. Absolutely. So we got to know that, but I love that, and it's one of the easiest things that you could do for yourself as a person trying to get a job, especially a young person at this point.
Well, and to that point, again, social media, for all its excellent benefits. I mean, it is a wonderful, powerful tool for people, for businesses, for everything. But the downside sometimes is it's squashed everybody's desire to socially network in person.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, networking has kind of all of a sudden become this thing that happens on a platform versus
man.
something that happens face to face and shaking your hand and, hey, Rob, Will Howard, it's great to meet you. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with this or with that. And people remember that. Fast forward 50 years from now, when I'm long gone from the banking industry, they probably won't remember what they said, but I hope they remember how I made them feel.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in the future, when you're only meeting each other as holograms, and yeah, it kind of reminds me when we talk about social media and the way it's changed things. Of even I did a little studying on this, and they were talking about how when there's a lot of people who are warriors of social justices now.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, we need people that take causes, right? But it used to be if you wanted to make a stand, you have to go grab a sign.
Yeah.
And maybe take off work.
Scream at the corner.
Do some penmanship on your
Yeah.
and nowadays, like, all you have to do is like sign an online petition.
Absolutely.
And myself and my marketing director, we're talking the other day about I don't even want to talk about the cause, but it was an interesting cause, but it was online on petition.com or whatever the heck it was, and there were like 132 signatures, and we were talking to each other like, what is this even doing?
Yeah.
We started talking about how many people are in America right now, and that was a whole other debate. Is it what are we up to now? 500 million or 5 billion?
We should
or what?
have vanilla ice cream for lunch every day.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And there's like 113 votes. I was like,
right.
I don't think this one's getting too many legs here. But anyway, well, enough with the social media for right now, because my social media consultant is listening. And
absolutely.
She gets mad at me.
Again, there's a lot more good than that. I did say for all its benefits.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, it's taken over. But tell me about what you see as challenges in the market right now. And when I say challenges in the market, I mean maybe for a business, maybe for a home buyer. Just, what are you seeing out there that's relative to your business that seem to be challenges?
Well, okay, it's a great question and probably could go a lot of different directions. I'll start with one and then a larger one, kind of 20,000-foot view, and then I'll shift down to maybe something specific from an actual kind of transaction kind of standpoint, if you will. But I think people in general, where it's you're putting on the hat as your home financial guru or your business guru, small business up to large business. I think right now, anytime there's shifting sands, anytime there's not a stability enough in the market for somebody to think far enough forward to plan, I think it creates just this uncertainty. I think you look at the stock market and you consistently see this up and down. It looks like an EKG machine, and that's a lot of time the market reacting to instability. Right. People don't know where interest rates are going. So do I buy that house now, or do I need to hold off?
And before you get on, I mean, I know you can't predict this per se, but where do you think they're going? I mean, are we going to be 2 years from now continuing to rise, or?
All I can do is tell you some of what I read, which says we'll continue to see a rising interest rate environment until it stabilizes itself a little bit, and then we think they'll see them fall back down again. But that would be a wonderful crystal ball to have.
Yeah,
that'd be an excellent way to make a lot of money.
Tell me
fast,
when to buy my
right,
stocks and
right,
everything else,
exactly.
right? Yeah, gotcha.
Exactly,
Sure.
but I think the challenges, the 20,000-foot challenges is that just consistent change. We actually, from a savings standpoint, you typically see savings go down in a really kind of a booming market, and now the market's shifted. There's concern the market's going down. Is there a recession? Is there not a recession? You actually see savings expand during that time generally, both for consumers and for businesses.
You're saying during a down market, savings go up,
right? Because they're planning. Those that are thinking through and doing what they need to be and are disciplined are saving a little bit more because they don't know what 6 months or a year from now would hold. And so, that savings kind of expands for most during that downtime. From a challenge, from a product standpoint, we mentioned about rates a minute ago. in a 6-month period, we've seen 30-year mortgage rates go from the mid to low threes up to the sevens, so more than double.
Wow.
If you think back over a 30 to 40-year period, I mean, I know when my wife and I got married and bought our first little house in Columbia, we were at 7.75 and thought we were doing great.
Yeah.
And so historically, rates are not as skewed as you would think they are, but we came out of such a flat rate environment for so long. But that's one area where we've seen a really big pullback is housing, just again because of that rate environment. There are solutions out there that are wonderful solutions that might be shorter term than what you would want to do in terms of a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. The national average for the duration of a home loan is still 7 years.
Wow.
Has been for a long time. And so we're seeing kind of a shift in the market from a product standpoint. Folks aren't looking at that 7.5-year, 30-year fixed, but maybe going into that shorter ARM product, rates a little bit lower. They know that something in their life will change, whether it's the sale of that home or kids going off to college, but something's going to make them think through restructuring their financial picture in the future. So the duration is not as important, maybe. So that I would say is a challenge. I mean, how do banks, in our industry, how do banks continue to build their balance sheet and grow in this rate environment is a real headwind, I would say, for our industry.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge for the banking industry. For the home buyers, I guess it's a similar challenge. But what else is happening out there? I mean, are any technology issues? Are you seeing competition from online sources that people get?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fintech and non-bank deposit entities are going up all over the place. Online banks, particularly in this rising rate environment, it wasn't just mortgage and loan rates that were really flat for a long time. If you were a fixed income retail customer and relying on CD interest rates, you got nothing for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, they've shot up through the roof now as well. And so those online providers of CD rate, there's a lot of money movement. And in addition to that, you layer on top of kind of a hectic stock market, and you see money flooding out of that into more stable fixed income kind of stuff. And so, you see a lot of competition from what was not competition 5 and 10 years ago. And the other thing we're seeing in the branches, and again, this is more of an industry thing too, driven more by COVID, is just the transition of that customer transaction. Generally in the banking industry, a new technology product takes a while to go. We're a little sluggish as an industry when it comes to bringing people into new technology. Remote deposit, I could not have convinced people 5 years ago to take a picture of a check and then throw it in the trash can and not to worry it will hit your bank account.
Yeah.
Well, the migration to the comfort level of that technology has shifted dramatically. So in our branches, we're down probably 30 to 40% in 3 years on transactions over the teller counter.
30 to 40%?
30 to 40%
Wow.
in some branches.
Is that hurting staffing at all? Or
it's had pressures on staffing. A lot of those transactions that used to walk into the branch are now coming through the drive-through. They don't like to come in the branch anymore.
Yeah.
They're dropping off in the night drop. They're doing the mobile check deposit or the remote deposit for our business customers.
Sure.
So you've seen this huge migration in a very short period of time brought on by COVID, which is, again, creates that shift. So how do we, in a very short period of time, shift to something we're used to taking 10 years to do? Well, you gotta be nimble and be on. But again, I think you'll continue to see that. The ability for ATM machines to take cash and check deposits now is light years where it was 3 years ago.
Such a good improvement too. There's certain things I look at sometimes, and we've almost talked about this as a staff. I think reading on a tablet is great.
Right.
But sometimes you're like, hey, it's just nice to have a book, but that you can just spread out on the beach and read. But at the same time, I'll tell you what, there's not a whole lot of downsides to a remote capture of a check, buddy.
No, it is nice.
That is a beautiful thing.
The trick for us, at First Citizens, we believe firmly that interacting with our clients is important.
Yeah,
and as much as I want you to have the availability of all the technology in the world, I still want to make sure that I'm taking the time out to call you, to sit down with you. Hey, Rob, can we meet and catch up?
Yeah.
Let's connect on where you are, what's going on, and dive down into it, because we don't expect you to take the time to sit there and think through everything you need to think through and know what we have to offer. It's up to us to make sure we're connecting with Rob, talking about where you all are. I want you to make those remote deposit checks. You don't need to come into the bank, but I do want to make sure I'm in front of you and connecting with you on a personal level about what's going on, about what your business is doing and needs, and really, again, kind of thinking strategically with you about all those little decisions that need to be made along the way.
Makes a lot of
sense. So that 15 years from now, you're where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great points. Well, so as we have a little bit of time left on the show,
certainly,
let's talk about you a little bit. What are your hobbies, Will?
Hobbies. Let's see. Well, like I said, I've got twin 18-year-old daughters and a 15-year-old son. So my hobbies, my time has changed drastically in the last couple of months.
As your income has
right,
changed.
Right, that's right. I wish I had a Will banking me over the last 15 years for college savings. But no, we live in Pawleys Island. We moved down there 13 years ago. My wife and I did. She grew up in Pawleys, so it was kind of a homecoming for her. But we love the area. We love what the area offers us here along the Grand Strand. So getting outdoors, we love we've got a little boat. We keep down there and get out on the river as much as we possibly can.
I had a sense about this because you kept making these boating rereferences. You know, hey, if you're a little off course. Yeah. So what do you got, a sailboat or is it
No, we've just got a little 19-foot center console. Okay. It's small. It's easy to get in and out. Yeah. We grew up going on it. Matter of fact, my kids during the summer, they would much rather go pack up, let's go get on the boat for the day, then go out and sit on the beach. So it was a blessing for me who loves the boat.
right.
And so that's, that was a lot of our family time growing up, was spending time out on the river, heading down to Georgetown, making a trip every now and then down to Charleston or McClellanville on the boat, and just, again, enjoying. I mean, low country South Carolina is as pretty a place as there is on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And so we've come to love it here and enjoy everything it's got to offer. So that's a lot of my time outside of work is with family, somewhere doing something we enjoy. And if I can get in front of a TV and watch some sporting event like badminton or football, we're good to go.
Badminton.
I'm just making something up. My wife always says, that somebody will say, do you like sports? My wife will say, he would watch badminton.
Right. I was worried I was going to have to
No offense to badminton players.
No,
sorry.
I was like, oh man, I got to come up with some badminton content quick.
Right. I'm that guy that'll watch those obscure Olympic events and be like, God, that's really cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, look, the Olympics are like this though. Some you never watched. I got into I guess they call it curling this year. Yeah. I mean, and it was crazy. You just watching the amount of strategy going in this thing and the intensity.
Oh yeah.
Hey, they're way more intense than anybody.
Those folks are the best in their country.
That's true.
Which is really cool. I mean, how much more pride can you take?
It is
than
cool
putting on your flag and representing them.
No, man, it's cool.
Endeavor.
The only thing, and look, I don't want anybody, any like world class curling champions to come yelling at me, but when I was growing up, I knew a lot of kids that want to play basketball and football are practicing really hard for that. Not as many curlers.
No. It's certainly grown in popularity.
No, it's very much a very niche sport, but man, they're good at it, the ones who are doing it.
I always see it and I think, man, they'd be good sweeping a driveway.
Man, oh boy,
just nailing it, just getting it going.
That's right. You're already thinking about, how can this help me?
Right, exactly.
Maybe I should have taught my kids how to do that. Is that what you're thinking? Right, I got you. So Will, any charities that are important to you? I always love to get to this point of the show where we can talk about charity that speaks to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would start as an organization. First Citizens is a big sponsor and partner with Teen Cancer America. So that's our brand, our nationwide kind of charity that we support. Teen Cancer America basically has gone in and seen a need for those teens that are going through that terrible disease that don't quite have space in the health facilities that maybe adult cancer patients or children that are cancer patients that have space for that. So we've partnered with them across the country to try and go in and develop space within the hospital system where teens who have a very different need, again, from an adult, not just the medical care that they need, but the additional care that they need as they fight through that time. So that's kind of a national, I would say, charity, and something we support and think are very passionate about. But then also, I mean, we're very involved and engaged locally in our market. I'd highlight this as kind of an industry positive. I think banks do a really good job of supporting their local communities. I mean, we expect our team to put their time, talent, and energy into their local communities to make it a better place. And we are grateful to support a lot of local charities here along the Grand Strand, and would look to continue that, and something I love to be involved in as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've said that, and I think I might have used this stat before, but 8 out of 10 customers said that a primary decision maker was that the company was locally owned and operated, with an emphasis being, support local.
Absolutely.
So that's very cool that you guys do that. Are you any softball teams or anything you're on this year? No.
I had to give up some of my sporting endeavors after.
Oh,
I used to play basketball every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at about 5 a.m. And then a few years ago, I twisted my ankle and realized you do not recover like you used to.
Oh, right.
And so I have not been as athletically. I
No more sick dunks
I talk
coming
about
from you.
discipline all the time.
Right.
I need more in my exercise life.
Well, I mean, I would just kind of, I had this idea. I wanted to watch you and I was going to challenge you to a slam dunk competition.
Well, I used to in high school. I actually could dunk a basketball, so I was good at that.
I mean, we got to dial the goal
We might
down to
have
like 8 foot.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But it would
and
be
have
incredible.
a mattress underneath it, probably. I always tell people, to me, the heaviest thing in the gym is the front door, so it's hard to get in there sometimes. But
Fair enough.
I do need to work on that piece of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Will, it's been great having you on the show today. Hopefully some people got some value of it. One thing I wrote down, and I think it's very important to remember, is you said culture is intentional. And I hope that anybody who's thinking about their company and thinking about what you're putting out there, not just to the public, but what you're internally putting out, is so important. So culture is intentional. Will Howard.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thanks for having me. I commend you and your team for putting this on. I think it's a wonderful thing to engage people, and I appreciate you letting me join you. Thank you, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank
man.
you for being here. And this is Rob Clemens. I'm signing out with Crown and Connections. We'll see you guys next time.